The month of April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month, and this week is National Work Zone Safety Week. And today's program is being conducted to help remind all drivers that nearly 1,500 Maryland crashes happen each year in a work zone, putting road workers and motorists alike at risk. Please keep in mind the recent tragedies that took the lives of 14 roadway workers in the state of Maryland since the beginning of 2023. Before I turn things over, I'd like to thank especially Ms. Debbie Jennings and Dr. Janet Bayhuth for all their efforts to bring this program to Mount St. Joseph, and especially to Mr. Murphy and our Wellness Club for sponsoring today's event. To kick things off this morning, please join me in welcoming the President of Chesapeake Region Safety Council, Mr. Dave Medeiros.
Good morning, gentlemen. Hey, can you all, you see I'm an old man, right? You see that gray hair and all that? I'm a little hard of hearing, so can you all give me a good morning? Good morning. All right, yeah, a little bit more, a little bit louder. Good morning. All right, see, I need a little spark to get me jump started every morning, but I work for an organization called the Chesapeake Region Safety Council. All right, our mission is to educate and influence people to prevent accidental injury and death. The whole purpose of our existence is to try to keep people from getting injured or killed. That's why we exist. And something you all need to understand or think about, you know, when you get the opportunity to drive one of these vehicles, you have risen to the level of maturity that you got to make serious decisions. And you know what? We don't always think about those serious decisions we're making when we're driving down the road. But they are very, very serious, and in a matter of a second's time, they can go south. And the consequence you pay for your behavior behind the wheel of a vehicle could be very tragic. Not only for you, but for someone else. And today's program has to do with work zone safety. And when you see these folks out here working on the side of the road, you may not realize it when you buzz by, but the sensation they have of vehicles passing by them at 50, 60, and 70 miles per hour, it'll make the hair on your neck stand up, because it is pretty scary. And you guys, each and every one of you, as you get the opportunity to drive a vehicle, have to really realize the magnitude of the choices that you make when you're driving down the road. Slow down, move over, and pay attention. Those are the three fundamental rules that you got to follow when you drive through a work zone. Slow down, move over, and pay attention. And we can tell you with pretty close certainty, when people crash and someone is killed, typically three things are involved. Three things: excessive speed, impairment. And when I say the word impairment, I don't necessarily always mean that you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol. That impairment could be excessive fatigue. You could be really tired, you could have bad allergies, things could be acting up, and you're not physically capable of operating a motor vehicle when you drive down the road. And there it is. There's a mature decision you have to make as to whether or not you get behind the wheel of that vehicle and take it down the road. And the third one that I want to share with you is distractions. Speed, impairment, and distractions. If you were able to harness those and control them when you're driving down the road, the likelihood of you being injured or seriously injured or killed in a crash goes way down. Think about these folks that are out here working, okay? They're mothers and fathers, brothers, sisters. They may be, some of you may even have people that do this for a living, and it's your dad that's out there working on the road trying to make it better for all of us. What I'd like to ask each and every one of you when you get behind this wheel, show them the respect that they deserve and pay attention to what you're doing. Drive through there and exercise a little bit of courtesy. You do that, These folks get to go home and visit their families at night, and it's up to you to help them out. One last thing I'm going to say. Later on today, you're going to get an opportunity to take something called the Work Zone Safety Pledge. And basically what it is just a trigger to have in your mind that when I approach a work zone and I see it, I slow down, move over, and pay attention. Let me say something to you all. This is going to be an extremely valuable lesson that you learned today. Please pay attention, take it serious, and think about what you see and put it into action whenever you get the opportunity to drive the vehicle. Thank you all very much.
Well, good morning. I'm Chrissy Nizer, and I'm the Motor Vehicle Administrator here in Maryland, and I also have the honor of serving as Governor Moore's Highway Safety Representative. And essentially what that means is the Highway Safety Office, along with all of our partners, we're dedicated to make sure that everybody gets home safely. We want to have 0 fatalities in Maryland because everybody deserves that. Nobody wants to lose a loved one. Nobody wants to lose a friend. I wonder if you could raise your hand. How many people have a driver's license or a learner's permit? Almost every one of you, it looks like. That is an important rite of passage. I get it. I was there. I love being in a branch office and seeing that excitement in somebody's eyes, knowing they got that license for the first time. But what I'd also like you to remember is, just like any skill, whether you play sports, maybe you play an instrument, maybe you have a hobby that you enjoy doing, you get better the more you do it. It's really important. And driving is one of those things that requires your full time and attention. You can't sit here and watch this today without being impacted. I know I've been to many of them, and it doesn't matter how many, they all have a deep impact. It's not about scaring you, but this is the reality. This is the reality of what our workers face. This is the reality of what happens when a crash truly occurs. The stat is used frequently, but I think it's important. 5 seconds to text the entire length of a football field. What can happen during that time? Certainly if you're in a work zone, it's a little more narrow. You have workers there, you have signs, you have a lot of things going on. It's just not worth it. And I know we think a lot about electronic devices, but it's other distractions, other people in the vehicle, other things going on, thinking about what you're going to do when you get home. And while we are concerned for your safety, we're also so concerned for our highway workers. It was mentioned already, but last March, 2 drivers who were speeding excessively killed 6 of our construction workers when they crashed in a work zone not too far from here on 695. Those 2 individuals are now facing jail time, but really the guilt that they have to live with for the rest of their lives is something that none of us want. And those families, they're impacted forever. You know, fortunately or unfortunately in this role, I get to meet these families. You don't want to be in their seat. You don't want to take the pain with you, and you certainly don't want to cause that pain. Safe driving habits is about doing all those good things in terms of slowing down, avoiding distractions, but it's also about buckling that seatbelt. Every time you get in the car, it really only takes 3 seconds, but also make sure everybody in the car with you is also buckled up. Whether you're going from school to work or sports events or meeting up with family or friends, it doesn't matter how far you're going. That seatbelt is your best defense if you are in a crash. Each year in Maryland, we lose more than 50 young drivers. Those are schoolmates, those are friends and members of the community, and we don't want to lose any more. Our goal is really to reach that number of 0 fatalities, each of us together, working together, doing the right thing. Every time we get behind the wheel, we can make that happen. So thank you on behalf of the Maryland Department of Transportation and Governor Moore. I hope you take the lessons from today, share it with your friends, share it with your family, because it is so meaningful and it can save another life. With that, I'd like to introduce Fire Chief Stewart. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Dante Stewart, Assistant Chief Operations for the Baltimore City Fire Department. And first off, we'd just like to thank Ms. Debbie Jennings for allowing us to come out and showcase what our units are capable of doing. As you know, this is Driver Awareness, Distracted Driver Awareness Week, And we just want to do our part to make sure you all are aware of your responsibility as licensed drivers. You are a part of this wonderful privilege that most don't get to do, and that's called driving. So be responsible, and again, just like they was talking about work zone safety, same comes with us as we're working on rescue incidents, medic incidents, and fire calls. You gotta go by emergency scene, take your time, pay attention, and go slow. So we are going to have a demonstration with some of our heavy equipment to show you all what we are capable of doing if the unfortunate happens and an accident occurs. But just do your part, be responsible, and enjoy this privilege that we take for granted, and that's driving. So next I'm going to introduce Maryland Transportation Authority Police. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sergeant Edward Bartlinski with the Maryland Transportation Authority Police. I am a Mount St. Joe alum, class of 2004. Today we're going to introduce a scenario. Thank you. Today we're going to introduce a scenario of a roadway crash. 3 students in a 2001 Dodge Caravan leave a high school event. The driver is buckled and has a provisional license. Along the road with him is a work crew, a surveyor and his summer intern. The back seat passenger in the van reaches up to show the front seat passenger a snap on his phone. The driver turns for a couple of seconds to look at what is happening with his passengers, and this causes him to steer the vehicle off the road and hit one of the workers. Transportation engineer that was surveying here, the gentleman standing up, the vehicle also strikes the guardrail and comes to a rest. The second roadside worker, a summer intern, he dials 911 and tries to send other co-workers for help to get medical assistance.
Scene of your emergency, do you need police, fire, paramedics?
Oh yeah, can you send the police and the fire department right away?
Okay, what's the location of your emergency?
295, southbound.
Okay.
Just past 195 east.
Okay.
Construction area.
Okay, guys, tell me exactly what happened.
There's a blue Dodge Caravan went off the side of the road right into the construction area.
Okay.
We hit a couple of construction workers.
Okay, are you with the patient now?
No, I'm not with them right now.
Okay, how many people are hurt?
It's going to be quite a few. Few construction workers are hit, and there's a few people in the van.
Okay. All right, I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Okay? Just reassure them that help is on the way. If you get more information or if anything gets worse in any way, call us back for further instruction. Thank you. Help is on the way, okay?
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay. It's only a medic coming to sit tight, all right? Check on that seat bottom, right? Yeah, that's in my front, yeah. I'm fine. Breathing. Hey, buddy. You have 2 guys, minor injuries. Looks like you have a guy going to cardiac arrest. All right. You going to start medic? Well, can. I'll grab him that back. Okay, sounds good. Time right here, okay? Sir, John, to move as well, okay? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Deep breathing.
Where are you going to do this?
Just my arms.
No headache.
No, sir. Just gonna hang on until you hear something. My head is like banging. My wrist, my shoulder. Still can't breathe right now. So that's up. This is 10-18 on those ones. Is everybody here?
You got a head injury, so add this real quick.
So we need a tourniquet for anybody?
Doesn't look like it. As far as now, it's like minor injuries to the arm. Head laceration as well.
Okay. What's going on with that guy over there?
Yeah, truck worker. That's right. Okay. Watch him. Rest before you rest. Okay. All right, you want to go over here?
All right, you have this injury right here. What I want you to do is just hold this gauze down, all right? Push as tight as you can to make sure that you're going to stop the bleeding, okay? Same with you. Do me a favor, just hold this on the top of your head like that, okay?
Talking at all?
He's unresponsive. Just my abrasions on my arms. Yeah, I think we all able to get out. I got these from the airbag.
Tell me about the
So we was driving, and then like my friend in the back, he showed my friend right here like a Snapchat, and I tried to look at it too, and then I lost control and crashed.
Where's the medics?
You go fine.
Charlie, do explain to him what you can. Hey, buddy.
Yeah.
So we break the glass, right? So that's why the sheets are over here.
Yes, sir.
Just be cognizant if anything. That's 24 cut or something. Something that just let me know when it's up, okay?
Okay.
give you guys an idea of exactly what's going on here. This is a typical response. As you can see, we have fatality on the ground. The fire department is cutting apart the car to gain access to the other patients inside, using the jaws of life, some other tools to break the glass. The police investigation has already started. We've interviewed witnesses, tried to identify everybody that's here on scene, and try to make notifications to the family of the deceased. Once the fire department gains access to all the patients, they'll load them on an ambulance and probably take them down to shock trauma downtown. The deceased will remain on scene until the medical examiner or the funeral home arrives to remove the bodies. Every situation's different. Depends on what kind of vehicle's involved, the nature and extent of the injuries, and the number of people involved as well. Like I said, the police investigation has already started. We're going to utilize various tools at our disposal to figure out what happened. We'll canvass the area for cameras and other things. We can also download the black box inside the vehicle. We'll get a speed approximately of how fast the vehicle is going, if the occupants were wearing their seatbelts, other things like that. And then we'll also come out, take photographs with our cameras as well as our drones. We'll fly our drones up to get an aerial view of just how big the scene is. And a scene like this, typically a fatal accident with multiple injuries, could take anywhere from 3 to 4 hours to maybe 12 hours to clear this whole scene up from start to finish. So it's a pretty extensive event. Ties up a lot of resources from the police and fire department, and then you're going to have tow trucks come in to move the vehicles. And then behind the scenes, the police department's going to start the investigation. Again, like I said, try to notify the families of the deceased, and that's probably going to be one of the hardest things the officers have to do that day, is go to their house, knock on that door with a priest, and inform the families that their loved ones are not coming home.
Are you good?
seriously injured person was transported via medic. They're going to scoop him up and go as quick as possible, get him down to the hospital. The walking wounded, these two gentlemen here speaking to the officers, they're going to give their statements on scene. They're going to describe what happened. We're going to get them down to the hospital here just as soon as we take care of the most seriously injured. After they're done giving their statements, they'll go down to the hospital for treatment where the officers will follow up with them. We're going to get them a copy of the report, things like that. They're going to be out here a while though, trying to help us figure out what's going on. Just remember, this all started just because the driver was distracted over maybe 3 or 4 seconds. That's all it takes. This happens every day on our roadways. We do the highways, the tunnels. We used to do FSK, but now that's a whole thing. But anyway, we see this every day, distracted drivers, intoxicated drivers. Fortunately, a lot of times it doesn't start out or it doesn't involve a fatality, but things have been going that way. Things have been increasing. The amount of road work I'm sure you guys see every day on the highway on 695 and 95. Workers are always out there. And they're really the most vulnerable because they're out there trying to do their job, trying to survey or whatever the case may be. So their attention is not on traffic. Their attention is not on the cars speeding by them 60 miles an hour. Their attention is surveying and doing their markings and their measurements, things like that. So their attention is divided. Their backs are to traffic, which is extremely dangerous, but it's part of their job. So now that the fire department's all done, the scene is safe, the injured have been removed, the seriously injured have been removed. They're going to start clearing up the scene, making sure it's safe for the medical examiner. The medical examiner and the funeral home will arrive on scene and start tending to the fatalities. The officers are going through the car now. They're looking for open containers of alcohol, cell phones, other pieces of evidence that'll aid in their investigation. One of the first things they're going to do is look for cell phones. They're going to grab their cell phones. We're going to impound those cell phones. We're going to secure them, and then we're going to obtain search warrants for them. So we'll be able to see everything that's in there, the times, the dates, locations. We'll know who was doing what and when. We'll be able to see who was using data, who was texting, things like that. And that'll all be part of the police report. So in Maryland, we have a medical examiner system as well as the funeral homes. They both respond to scenes like this to aid in the removal of the bodies. Something like this, the deceased will go to the medical examiner's office downtown to receive that autopsy to give us condition and cause of death. In this case, it appears multiple injuries, blunt force trauma, things like that. Once the medical examiner is done with the remains, which usually takes a couple days, they'll be removed to the funeral home for the funeral.
Hey, Sal, you mind moving them back to the funeral home? morning. My name is Corporal Jeremenko with the Maryland Transportation Authority Police. I'm the coordinator for our collision reconstruction unit, so the unit that would come out, investigate fatal, life-threatening injury collisions. So in a case like this, as you saw, that would be how we would handle the initial scene. We would collect all evidence that we could possibly gather. We're not initially going to charge somebody right away. We're going to complete a thorough investigation, and at the conclusion of our investigation, which generally takes 2 to 3 months depending on how long, we're going to get in contact with the state's attorney's office for whatever jurisdiction we were in. So in this case, Baltimore City. All of our cases go before a homicide state's attorney because this is considered a homicide case. Even though it's a motor vehicle collision, they don't treat it very differently. So the same state's attorneys that would be prosecuting murders and manslaughters are also going to be prosecuting these types of investigations. What happens is we'll give all of our evidence over to them. We're going to give them our conclusion, whatever we found. So in this case, we seize that phone, we would download that phone. We might find evidence of that. We would download the airbag module, see whether or not anybody was seat belted, and we would give them every violation of Maryland law, both just regular traffic tickets that you might get all the way up to criminal. In a case like this with distracted driving, you're looking at the possibility of vehicular manslaughter by motor vehicle that can carry a maximum penalty of 10 years in jail, okay? Once we give it over to the state's attorney's office, what they're going to do is determine whether or not charges are applicable and what charges we should place. The investigator is then going to go forward, get a warrant for that person's arrest. We're then going to come and arrest that person, take them down to wherever it is. In this case, it would be the Central Booking Intake Facility in Baltimore City. Be processed in there, go before a court commissioner, would determine whether or not you can have a bail sit against you or if you need to stay in jail until your trial date. These trials can be extremely lengthy. You would go sit there in jail in all likelihood until your trial comes up. Trials are typically going to be in a circuit court because of the nature of this offense. You pick a jury of 12 members of the Motor and Voter Rolls of Maryland. You would then have a full trial, and then that jury would determine beyond a reasonable doubt whether or not you were guilty or not guilty of these crimes. Does anybody have any questions for us as the law enforcement officers about the way that this process works? Awesome.
Good morning, how's everybody doing? My name's Lieutenant Jason Leone. I work for the Baltimore City Fire Department, specifically assigned to Rescue Company 1. First and foremost, that truck right there, and that, it's called a squad. One of our responsibilities that not all fire trucks in Baltimore have is to be able to cut people out of their cars. So one of the things that was just brought up was, you guys might have thought there was some sound effects involved in that. That's not. It's a pretty traumatic experience, especially if you're trapped in the car. Those tools are run by hydraulic power, so they're extremely powerful. You can see it kind of tore the car apart pretty easily, which isn't easy to do. They're loud, they're noisy, the metal cuts, makes a lot of noises. There's airbags involved, so all that is really what happens, if not 10 times louder than what it was here, because we try to keep the noise down. Normally when someone's trapped in their vehicle after an accident, there'd be a lot more fire trucks here too. You would get what's called a ladder truck, an engine company, a battalion chief, an EMS officer, a couple more medic units. So it's a pretty chaotic scene. One of the biggest things is this is a pretty mundane accident, meaning it's pretty simple. Most of the time when there's drinking and driving involved, you either flip your car, you're at a high rate of speed. It's a lot more in depth. We may have to take the roof off the car. We actually might have to lift like the steering wheel off of someone, so we lift the whole dash off somebody. So it's a pretty traumatic event for everybody that's involved, including the firefighters and the police officers, right? A high school student who's dressed like they're going to prom or after prom. It's happened a couple of times in my career, and it's not an easy thing to deal with either across the board. So, any questions for us on the fire department side? Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Debbie Jennings. I'm with the Chesapeake Region Safety Council, and there's going to be a lot more formal education done in the auditorium in a few minutes, but we do have fire and MDTA police here. We had Wiley Funeral Home. Thanks to Ted's Towing for the vehicle, and one of my organization's board members, Don McKay from Long Fence. This scene and the people that are here now are almost all going back to work. So I wanted to thank them in front of you all right now. There'll be some additional individuals in a few minutes, but I wanted to make sure that you had the chance to, while they're here, tell them thank you. So if you wouldn't mind giving them a round of applause. And then of the MVA, we have Ms. Chrissy Nizer. She's in charge of everybody's getting their driver's license, so give her a high five. And the MVA's Highway Safety Office funded a little bit of this, so that representative is Mr. Mark Wall, and he's here dressed in the orange shirt. And you'll meet Ms. Bayhuth and Ms. Elsie in a few minutes in the auditorium. And then I'm not sure if my boss is staying. That's Dave Medeiros. He did the opening remarks. He's amazing to work for. And I want you to thank him personally before he leaves as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings, and I just want to echo my thanks and appreciation to all of our first responders here today who made this possible for us. As Ms. Jennings alluded to, we are going to go into the auditorium.
They're going to speak after me. Congratulations. You go to a fantastic school who supports you and who wants you to do well in life, beginning right now today. Even before, obviously. Let's see them. Whose friends drive distracted sometimes? This isn't about you, this is your friends. Whose friends drive distracted a lot? Seatbelts? Sometimes? Every time? Every time. Huh. Whose friends wear them in the back seat? All right. Good morning, guys. My name is Dr. Bayhuth. First and foremost, I am an MSJ mom. Go Gales. I am also a crash safety engineer, so I guess you can imagine what I'm going to talk to you about today. But before we do, I want to set some expectations, and here they are. We are not here today to tell you to wear a seatbelt, because we know better than you. You guys don't know anything, so just do it. We are not here today to tell you don't drive distracted. Could be dangerous. You might hurt someone. I know better than you do. You don't know anything, so don't do it. We're not doing that today. We are not here today to tell you don't drive distracted, don't speed, stop messing around with your friends in the car, and don't drive like yahoos on the highway. We're not doing that today. Today we are going to give you a whole slew of information, lots of great information. It's your time to figure it out. You have to figure it out. Today is about being dead. Today is about hurting someone, maybe to the point where they wish they were dead. Today is about you seeing everyone around you and understanding what it is you need to do to keep them from having a bad day because of you. Today is about life and death. Today is about life-changing injuries. Today is about that dent on the back of the bumper of the guy you just rear-ended at the traffic light and you just didn't mean to do it. Because none of us want that. None of it feels good. Actually, all of it feels horrible. But today is about your Mount St. Joe family and what you're going to do to protect them. So, hey, stay with me. This is going to go fast. Let's do this. Come on. Thanks to my friends at the Physics Cafe. Is Dr. Murdoch here? Hello. You are my people. So I am a crash safety engineer. Like I mentioned, I own a company called Impact Research and also Crash Core. It's a nonprofit engineering firm. It's Crash Core, Crash Center for Research and Education. That's how we're brought to you today, to do some research and show you and give you some education about it. We have engineers, epidemiologists, statisticians, database engineers, data engineers, a whole slew of different people who work together with us, because what do we do all day long? We look at car crashes. Pretty interesting stuff. Different crashes all the time. No crash is like the first one. No crash is like the next one. They are all different. You put different people inside, now it makes it even more different. It's what we do all day. We take a look at injury, because at the end of the day, nobody cares about their car anymore. Their car's totaled, it's done. It's the people inside that obviously we care about. So at the end of the day too, we get the team review together. We have trauma doctors, we have auto manufacturer engineers working with us, BMW, Hyundai, Porsche, my engineers from our company, trauma surgeons from University of Miami work with us. We get together. Did the car do what we wanted it to do? Were the injuries that they sustained preventable? How do we fix it? That's what I do all day long. Hopefully making cars safer, hopefully making roadways safer, hopefully making you and all of your families safer. So before we get into today's crash, I wanted to give you a little bit of physics, a little bit of background. This is about occupant kinematics and occupant dynamics. What's happening to the occupant in the car during the crash? A lot of people forget about that part because it's the car, it's destroyed. But it's the people. What happens to the people during that crash? Very, very simply, you could put a whole lot of physics and math behind it. You don't have to. All you need to know is, if you have a crash force going that way, which way does the body move? This way. It always moves toward the crash. It doesn't matter what the crash direction was. Was it a front crash? Was it a side crash, a rear crash? Was it a rollover? That makes it a little bit different. But it doesn't matter the crash direction, your body always goes toward the crash. Remember this, it's going to help you when we start talking about outside, the crash from outside. It doesn't matter the force. If I just push you in your back, you're going to go that way. It's the force small, force huge, it doesn't matter. Your body always goes toward the crash. The timing, it doesn't matter. The object that you hit, it doesn't matter. You're always going toward that crash. Remember that. In every crash, we have 3 impacts. Interesting. 1 crash, 3 impacts. This is what we care about. Car hits a tree, body hits the car, brain hits the skull. That's the important part. We got to keep that inside stuff from being squished. We don't want the hearts and the lungs and even your abdomen to be moved out of place. Even just a little bit can mess you up for a long time. So it's the inside part, obviously, that we're very worried about. And it's the skull that's actually the impact point for the brain. Even if you have no trauma to your skull, no lacerations, no abrasions, no nothing, it's still your brain inside moving around like a concussion. Your brain is moving around. It's sitting in there like in a pool of jelly almost, like suspended. You knock your head pretty good, your brain's moving around. The harder you knock your head, well, you'll see what happened to Kai. We'll show you his injuries. So back to today's crash scene. We placed it on 295 South near BWI, just south of that entrance to BWI. This was a Dodge minivan, as you saw outside. Speed limits, construction zone, 35. I think we all have a better taste of what construction zone importance is today. They were probably traveling about 50 miles an hour. Honestly, it doesn't matter how fast you're traveling when it's your car versus a pedestrian. They're squishable, to be kind of frank about it. It doesn't matter how fast you're going. You hit any pedestrian, they're going to lose. In the car today, we had Malcolm. He was belted. He walked away with airbag abrasions on his arms. He walked away just fine. Kid in the back seat was Karan, improperly belted. What's that mean? If you have a shoulder belt and a lap belt, and you're wearing only the lap belt so that you can lean up into the front seat and talk to your buddies, you are improperly belted. You are now out of position. And that is referring back to crash tests. Everybody's seen a crash test on TV. And the dummies sit there very still and perfect. They sit there realizing, the people doing the test realizing this is the perfect position for any occupant in any crash. And who sits there like this? Nobody. If you're sitting up there like this, you're even worse out of position. Injury risk goes through the roof at that point. He is improperly belted only at his abdomen. He's able to go forward with his upper body. Unbelted was Kai. We're going to talk a lot about Kai's injuries simply because he was unbelted. And in a crash where somebody who was belted literally walked away, it's a huge difference. And of course, Chase, he was the fatal pedestrian at the crash at the construction site. We'll talk about his injuries. So Malcolm, driver, belted, he was distracted. He didn't have his phone. He has a provisional license with 2 friends in the car. He's distracted immediately, simply because he has 2 friends in the car. Friends are distracted on their phone, doing whatever, showing snaps, whatever it is. Maybe you think that's okay, but what happened in this crash was not okay. Contusions, seatbelt sign, literally just bruises where the seatbelt held him back. Airbag abrasions. Guarantee they test him for drugs and alcohol. 100% they guarantee they test him for drugs and alcohol. And you heard one of the officers say they're looking for a cell phone. How many people, you don't need to raise your hands, how many people put their cell phones out visible when they're driving at your age on a provisional license? I guarantee you get pulled over, or God forbid you cause a crash or in a crash, what's the first thing that cop's looking for? That cell phone. Put it away, put it somewhere out of sight, out of mind, then you don't have to worry about it if something happens. His outcome, minor injuries, but jeez, he killed somebody. By the way, this is not a made-up crash. We do this. This happens. I'm not that creative to come up with something like this. I've done a crash like this probably a couple months ago. Criminally negligent manslaughter by vehicle. He was just driving and wondered what his friends were doing, and he killed somebody. Now he's got to face that, quite possibly. Track and field is on hold because he's dealing with the consequences. Not just the law consequences, the social consequences. How do you look at him in school now? Dude, that's the guy who killed somebody. I heard he was distracted. I heard he was drunk. No, he wasn't drunk. I heard he was drunk. I heard he was on drugs. I heard he was doing this. I heard all of this stir around something because you took your eyes off the road. Financial aid and college. You guys are going to be doing that next year, if not sooner. You need to, disclose criminal history on a lot of college applications and definitely on financial aid. This is going to screw him up for a long time because he turned to look away. Quran, rear passenger. Hey, here's a reminder. Direction of force. You saw how it was positioned against the guardrail, and there's a lot of bounce back during an impact. but the direction of force generally was coming at the front passenger corner. So where's Karan going to go? Toward the front passenger corner. Remember, he's only belted at the waist. He's got a lot of freedom in his upper chest. Improperly belted rear seat occupant, out of position. We talked about that. He's not sitting like those dummies do. Moderate injuries, he did okay, except he's got a concussion from hitting the driver's seat back. Easily, concussion. Dislocation of his left shoulder. As he's going forward to that front passenger side, he hits his shoulder, hits his head. Can easily get up there during this crash. Fractures, 4 of them on his right hand, because he's smacked it into the back of the center console. All of this stuff in the car that seems to be safe and put there to keep you safe. Have you ever even thought about what would happen if your hand slammed on that console? You've got 4 broken bones, potential surgeries, and he wants to be a physical therapist. A dislocated shoulder that might need surgery, and a hand that definitely needs surgery and a lot of PT. I don't know if he could be a PT himself. One crash, one stupid instance, and maybe he needs a career change. Rugby's definitely on hold. Kai, front seat passenger, not belted. Can't tell you how, actually, I will tell you. Later, we'll find out why. Crash direction, he's going toward that front passenger area, right? He's unbelted. Remember, he's in the front seat, he's turned around talking to his friend in the back. His hips are probably turned. Crash happens, where does he go? This picture up here with the frame of the car, that red highlighted part is called the A-pillar. His head is going to hit that A-pillar. It is a structural part of the car that keeps the occupant safe if you don't hit it with your head. If you were belted, you wouldn't have. That A-pillar is going to damage him significantly, and we'll talk about injuries in a minute. Fractures to his skull, contusions. A-pillar is highlighted, dash is highlighted. He's going right in that area. He's a free-moving object inside that car. Wherever that crash force is coming, he's going right for it. Whatever's in his way, he's going to hit. Subdural hematoma. This is going to mess him up for a long time. He hit his head on the A-pillar, and now his brain, I mentioned, is moving around inside his skull, right? He does have a skull fracture, but it's more about the brain at this point. It's moving around. There are so many tiny little frail blood vessels and arteries inside your brain. You shake it a little too hard, you bump it a little bit too hard, they start to bleed. And then you have what's called a hematoma. It's a collection of blood. It's like clotting blood with inside your head, inside your skull. Top picture there, you can see the view from the top. It's that pink, it's collecting right there. And the more it collects, the more it pushes his brain to the other side. You push your brain from one side to the other, or do anything to your brain, one side or the other, even just a little bit. Now you've got cognitive issues, undoubtedly. See the red line down the middle of his brain? Red line down the middle of the brain is showing how it's not centered anymore. This is called a midline shift. That's showing how much collection is in his skull, blood collection is in his skull, and pushing the brain over. This could cause unconsciousness for a long time, coma for a long time, but as it turns out, before I get there, rib fractures. Hit the dashboard with his rib. He's got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rib fracture. That's called a flail chest. That means the chest is no longer stabilized. That means he's not breathing very well now. That's a lot of rib fractures. That's a lot of containment that is no longer there. Destabilized, hard time breathing. Now he has what they call a pneumothorax. It's air in the chest. You're not supposed to have air in the chest, you're supposed to have air in the lung. So as soon as you have air in the chest, you can't pull in air anymore. Pneumothorax is bad news for him. Fracture to his right foot. That was a no-brainer because his foot is turned sideways and now being slammed down into the floorboards and under the dash. With these type of injuries for a healthy high school kid, hospitalized for a good month. If he's lucky, for just a month. With the concussion and the brain injury, he'll have headaches for a long time, probably a good 9 months, 7 months to start feeling like himself. I'm sure some of you have had concussions and you don't quite feel right. This is probably 10 times worse. Physical disabilities, cognitive issues, all because of that brain injury. He had a chest tube because of the pneumothorax, because of the air in there. They had to get the air out so he could breathe normally. And there's a 50% recurrence with a pneumothorax like this, which means you have to have limited exercise, which means your sports are on hold, which means possible your hobbies are on hold, which means just walking to class is a little bit more difficult because of one stupid move. 4 months of PT for the foot. I'll tell you, with a broken foot, lifelong issues. I broke my foot 35 years ago. I still think about it every day. Guaranteed anybody who breaks their foot like this, thinking about it every day forever. With injuries like this, you're not going to college right away. You can't. You can't even think straight. It would be a waste to go to college. You're just going to drop out because you can't even think, you can barely think long enough to write your name to get through an application. College is probably put off for a couple years, and in Kai's situation, he's not shot putting anymore. Can't do that with a broken foot like this. So construction crew, Chase was phenomenal. I don't know how you laid there that long and didn't move. You were really great. Fatal injuries. He was thrown past the guardrail, through the guardrail, hit by the car, onto the ground. The worst enemy of this pedestrian was the ground. He could have possibly survived if he were just able to get hit by the car even, crush his legs, and then somehow stand up. But it's the ground that got him. That highlighted part, the atlanto-occipital joint dislocation. I can't even tell you. I'll describe what it is. I see this so often in car crashes. I'm wondering why. Atlanto-occipital joint dislocation is your skull on top of your spine, and it dislocates. In everyday terms, it's an internal decapitation. It happens way more than it should. When your head is hitting something that's not moving and you're moving pretty darn fast, easily, this is your injury. The only good thing about this injury is it's instantaneous death. So for a pedestrian to have this, if death is imminent, this is actually pretty good for them. For somebody who is, mocked up 3 years on the job, was just accepted to law school, and is coaching at his alma mater. That's done. So, what if this was your fault? Because today's it's not about you, but what if it was your fault? And all of this happened to all of these people, and Malcolm walked away. That happens a lot too. What if this was your fault? So it's not about you if you die. Let's take me for instance. I'm in a crash and I die. I'm one dead. Who's left behind? 56 people-ish who are very close to me. My kids, my husband, my parents, my in-laws, my sisters, brothers, nieces, colleagues, friends, workers, teams, organizations. I don't know, 56 people. So personally, indirectly affected by my death, tend to think people like me, kinda. So it's gonna be more people. Extended family, extended friendships, acquaintances. Let's put 100 on it. Business is affected. I own a business. You don't have to own a business to know a lot of people. If you are in any kind of work, any line of work, you know a whole lot of people. Let's put 750 people on there affected by that. Total of over 900 people affected by me, one death. Here's the crass part. I'm dead and gone. Probably in a better place. But it's all of these people left behind. So what about the person who's involved in my crash? Maybe they caused my crash. Now what? One person involved. People around you, very close to you, have to cope with you dealing with it. Personally affected, same sort of thing. 50 people, businesses affected, 450 people. There's guilt. There's depression. There's criminal issues, financial issues, liability, your own issues, social negatives. You got to deal with people looking at you and wondering, how could he do that? So at the end of the day, 1 dead. There's nearly 1,500 people who are affected by this. This is not about you.
When we drive fast, we don't realize the danger we're in. If you're driving at 90 kilometers per hour and you crash, the speed your body impacts is the same as falling from the first floor of a building. At 110 kilometers per hour, the impact is the same as falling from the 5th floor. And at 125 kilometers per hour, the impact is like falling from the 9th floor.
Yeah, the faster you go, the bigger the mess. Kudos to New Zealand for making this. Fantastic video. It gives you a sense of what the heck is it I'm dealing with when I'm on 695. There's an unbelted problem in the United States. It's getting better, but we're still stuck. Every year there's a count, an estimate, a count of how many people in Maryland, well, actually all of the states have to do it, but in Maryland, how many people are belted versus not belted. And the numbers are pretty consistent. About 90% of us are belted. We have people actually out all across the state looking and counting, belted, belted, not belted, 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 not belted. Actually counting. And then we extrapolate to see how much of the state is actually belted. 90% belted, 10% unbelted on any given year. Not bad, it's an A. Until you think about it this way. How many fatals, vehicle fatals in Maryland in 2022? 351 people killed in a car in 2022. And if you split that up, it's 42% unbelted, 58 belted. It's about half. It changes year to year. It's about half. Here's the connection. A lot of people don't think about this. Here's the connection. The 10% of Maryland that's not belted makes up almost half of those people who died in a crash. Do you see that? 10%, a small number of Maryland that's making up almost half of those people who died. That should start putting some light bulbs on for you. So why not an airbag? Isn't that enough? Look at all those airbags. They even have pedestrian airbags on the outside of hoods now. Isn't that enough? Just have my airbag. Well, no, it's not enough because airbags are actually designed to work with the seatbelt. They came after seatbelts, long after seatbelts. They are all designed to work with the seatbelt.
We can see here the seatbelt pre-tensioner in action. It actively tightens the seatbelt, helping to ensure you're securely in your seat. Then, to help prevent injury from the seatbelt itself, the force limiter reduces the pressure of the seatbelt against your chest. Together they work with the front airbag to give you better protection.
The airbag and the seatbelts, it's a perfect dance. Crashes happen in 350 milliseconds, which is faster than you blink. It's about a third of how fast you can blink. Oh, so fast. These airbags and seatbelts are meant and designed to work together perfectly. But you gotta use them to do that.
A simulated 35-mile-per-hour impact, the unbelted dummy slams into the back of the driver's seat, pushing the driver dummy into the deploying airbag and steering wheel. Drivers are twice as likely to be killed in crashes when the occupant behind them is unrestrained.
35 miles an hour, that's nothing. And that's a crash that caused that back seat unbelted passenger to slam into the front dummy, who was belted, and he ate the airbag and he ate the steering wheel. So it is not just about you. You got to think about the people in the car around you. In any kind of crash, any direction of crash, you are a free object moving, potentially injuring anybody in your way. And this is a big deal in the back seat because people think that the back seats are safer. Think again, because imagine all of these airbags in the front seat. We've almost gone overboard with keeping the people in the front seat safe. In the back seat, you've got to buckle up, keep everybody safe, not to mention yourself. Safety technologies. I figured you guys would like kind of this kind of stuff. You're driving computers. I don't care how old your car is, you are driving a computer. And every day those computers are being upped so that it's even safer and more technology to help, keyword, to help the drivers. The pretty cool stuff that's happening now is autonomous driving. There are several levels of autonomy. Level 0 is you're driving your granddad's car, or maybe your great-granddad's car. And then there's assisted, there's partial automation. People have heard of cruise control. People have heard of active cruise control. There's also eyes off, where you can take your eyes off the road for just a bit, but you gotta keep your hands on the wheel. There's hands off, but you can't do that for too long. The car will remind you. There's a whole bunch of different things. So level 5 is when you program the car and say, go pick up Johnny from soccer practice, and then bring Johnny back. No driver. Computer, get him, bring him back. That's level 5. Anybody have a guess where Teslas are? I hear 5. Well, actually, I hear everything. Would you be surprised to know they're level 2? For a car that has autopilot, I'm sorry for all the Tesla owners. For a car that has autopilot, it is the hugest misnomer. Frankly, shame on them. It is not an autopilot. The car is not in control. The driver is in control. And with all of these technologies, automatic emergency braking. I'm sure a lot of the cars that we drive have automatic emergency braking. Oh, I'm not going to rear end anybody because the car's going to stop in time. 2 problems with that. Physics is a problem because it may not stop it in time. And also, did you know that if you tap your brakes during a potential pre-crash, it's shut off? Automatic emergency braking is no longer there because the car said, oh, he tapped the brakes, he's here. He sees what's happening. Nobody knows that because nobody reads their manual for their car. It's different for every car, for every manufacturer. The best advice here is drive like you've got nothing. The car is going to help you when it can. I don't care if you have the latest car off the lot, drive like you've got nothing, because the car will help you when it can. What is the #1 life-saving technology in cars today? I love St. Joe's because you guys are smart. Niels Bohlin. It was invented in 1955, and the seatbelt is still the most life-saving technology in cars today. 100%, no argument. All right, provisional license. Everybody has a provisional license, I think, right now. There's a lot of rules. No alcohol, 0. Zilch, nada. No passengers in your car from outside your family for 151 days. I'm a good driver. I can have my buddies in the car, but apparently not because the law is saying no. Fine. Driving between midnight and 5 a.m., can't do it. Got to wear a seatbelt, no phones, including hands-free device. That's why you got to put your phone away, because if you get pulled over, God forbid, or some crash or something, just put it away and it's a non-issue. So there's a lot of rules. Why are we putting rules on you guys? Making it harder, making life harder because you could have brought 5 of your friends to the next sporting event, or you could have brought 5 of your friends to the movies or out to dinner, whatever it is you're doing with all your buddies. But you can't because you have a provisional license. Why? Because we learned from other crashes before you, tens of thousands of crashes from teens before you, we've learned a lot. This is all about data. This is all about what we saw happen before. This is not about making your life miserable or hard or just a bummer. This is all about, hey, we've seen this a million times before, so don't do it. That's what these laws are. The greatest chance of a crash in your lifetime is within the first 6 months of getting your license. That is the greatest chance that you will crash. God forbid that for any of us in this room, but that's the most vulnerable time for you, based on tens of thousands of crashes before you. It's going to happen then, most likely. I want to bring your attention down to the bottom. 3, teens driving with 1 passenger, chances of crashing are 2 times more likely. With just 1 passenger, put 2 people in there, you're up to 158% greater risk of a crash. Put 3 people, it's up to 200%, over 200%. How do I know this? Because of a bazillion crashes before you. I'm not making this up. This is not just to make your life miserable. It's all in the data, and we're all pretty smart. So we're learning from it. Why are we learning from it? Because now we know that distracted driving is a real big problem. Speeding, aggressive driving, seatbelts, impaired driving. These are all problems that we all know that there are laws about. Laws restricting people from doing this because we know better. But by the way, there are also laws for roadway design. The feds say you have to have a road curved like this at a certain bank because it's safe. The states have to abide by these rules too. Also, vehicle design. Ay, caramba. We work with these car companies who are constantly being pushed back on what they would love to do because the feds are saying, no, no, no. Keep my people safe, keep these occupants safe, you have to do this, or prevent this. There are rules for everyone for very good reason. All right, guys, so you figured it out. A lot of information. God, I could speak all day about this stuff. So much information here to take in and understand. I love the faster you go, the bigger the mess. It just means something. Drive like you have no tech. That's a huge one, especially for people with new cars. Drive like you've got nothing. And really, it's not about you. It's about everybody you would leave behind or the people that you might affect. This is the most important question. When's your crash going to happen? St. Joe's, thank you.
For inviting me here today and allowing me to share my story with you. My name is Suzanne Elsey. I'm from the Kent Island area just across the Bay Bridge on the Eastern Shore. And over the past few years, I have attended, many of these mock crash events, sharing my story with young drivers like yourselves after the mock crash. And the reason I do so is because while the mock crash is very true to life and does a great job showing you what happens when first responders are called to an accident scene, what it doesn't do is tell you the story behind the crash. And by that I mean the stories of not just the victims, but more importantly, those that are left to pick up the pieces. And I'll tell you right now, guys, I've done this, I don't know, probably 100 times, shared this story with kids like you. And I do get very emotional, and you'll understand why as I tell you the story. So just, if you could bear with me. I was always one of those people who thought that I would never be impacted by something so horrific. And on Wednesday, April 10th, 2013, life kind of really punched me in the gut and showed me how wrong I was. My youngest son, Tyler, just 10 months after graduating from high school, was killed in one of the most horrific car crashes ever to happen in Queen Anne's County. And to make it even worse, his 3 best friends were killed with him. They were all 4 killed together. So my hope is that by meeting with kids like you and sharing his story, that it will help you make better choices, better decisions, help you understand how one bad choice in a matter of literally seconds can not only take your life, but can impact literally thousands of people for the rest of their lives. Before I get into telling you about the boys' story, it's important to me for you to see who the boys were before that one bad choice ended their lives that day. So I'm just going to play a really quick video. That'd be great. Thank you. So as you can see, they were normal teenagers, no different than probably many of you. Corey was the captain of the football team, the high school football team. Tyler was on the homecoming court. All four of them were great students, and they were all four so loved by everybody who knew them. Teachers, students, they were very popular and very joyful kids. Let me get this going here. Tyler met Harrison in the 6th grade, and they pretty much instantly became best friends. And from that moment, clear up till the minute that they died, they remained best friends. Usually you didn't see one without the other. In the 7th grade, Tyler met Liz, and they became friends. It was a girl in his class. And they stayed friends and actually dated throughout all 4 years of high school. Tyler worked from the time he was 14 years old and pretty much bought himself everything from that point on. And as much as he loved his friends and loved hanging out with them, he was even closer to his siblings. He had 2 older brothers and an older sister. His older brother was 10 years older than him and was a volunteer firefighter. And Tyler idolized him. He wanted to grow up to be just like him, and he literally counted the days down till he turned 16 so that he could volunteer right along with him. And that's exactly what he did. He turned 16, and literally that day, he signed up to become a volunteer and started taking fire class. And by the day of the crash, he had actually managed to put in more than 350 hours worth of training with the Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute, I think is the official name. And he was certified in Fire 1, Fire 2, Hazmat, and EMS. And he was just days away from finishing another class that we actually found out he had just passed the day after the crash, so he didn't even know he had passed it. I'll never forget, after he was killed, after the crash, I got so many emails from people, messages from people telling me stories about Tyler, and my very favorite one was kind of a silly one, and it was my favorite because it really showed who Tyler was. She said that a bunch of them, Tyler and Mike and Harrison, who were also in the crash, were all at the firehouse hanging out, and they were goofing off, running around, being teenagers, and she bumped in or crashed into another kid that she was running around with, and when she did, she jammed her finger into the door really, really hard, and it hurt a lot. So she starts crying, she's hysterical, and she said Tyler dropped what he was doing, ran over to her, scooped her up, and carried her to the ambulance bay and put her in the ambulance and started bandaging her hand and talking all this stuff that she said sounded like something like EMS code or something. And she started laughing, and she said, Tyler, I just jammed my finger. All this really isn't necessary. And she said, and he suddenly stopped and looked at me and just smiled and said, I know, but it made you smile and forget your finger was hurting so bad, at least for a little while. And that's the kind of person Tyler was. He lived to make other people happy. No matter how big a problem you would have, he would make it seem very tiny and show you the good in it. I'll never forget the first fire call he had with his brother. It was Christmas morning, about 2 years before the crash. We were at Chris's house celebrating Christmas, opening up gifts, and the volunteer siren went off, and boy, him and Chris, they didn't waste any time. They jumped up and started rushing towards the door to respond. And of course, my heart just dropped to my stomach because the call was actually for a working fire with smoke and fire showing from a two-story residential building. So I ran after him and I grabbed my oldest son. I said, Chris, keep an eye on your brother. Don't let anything happen to him. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, that's my little brother. Don't worry, I got his back. I will never let anything happen to him. Well, needless to say, that those words really impacted him after April 10th of 2013. Sorry, guys. So Tyler's senior year, he really started to become serious, especially with the firefighting. He volunteered almost full-time, was constantly at the firehouse. And one night he came home and his face was literally glowing. And that's not an exaggeration. He was just, I've never seen him like so excited about something. Well, he had been at the firehouse that day, and a call went out for a man in cardiac arrest. And the call happened to be right around the corner from the firehouse. And as it turned out, Tyler and one of the other the volunteers that were there were the first ones on the scene. And Tyler immediately got to work, he started administering CPR, and eventually the paramedics got there and took over. But by the time they did, the man was in much better shape, had a heartbeat, and it was clear he was going to make it. Tyler actually rode to the hospital, to Anne Arundel Medical Center, along with the paramedics and the victim. And he said, Mom, before I left, his wife came up to me and gave me this biggest hug, had tears streaming down her face, and said, do you realize that because of you, I still have my husband and my kids still have their father? And she could not have thanked him enough. And at that moment, that was when he decided he was going to spend the rest of his life saving lives. He was totally devoted to that. That's all he wanted to do. A couple nights before the crash, he came home, had a rare night off work. He worked 2 jobs when he was killed, plus volunteered, plus took the classes at the Fire Institute. So it wasn't often he had a night off. And this was another time he came home, all excited and glowing, only this time it wasn't that he saved a life, it was because he finally got the pair of Nike shoes he had been literally saving for months to buy. After, paying a car payment, car insurance, and everything else. And he was so proud to finally get these shoes that he had waited on. Even got the little shoe kit, the care kit that you use to take care of leather shoes. And he was just so proud of that. And you understand why I'm telling you that story here in a few minutes. So after dinner, we sat down, and he got real serious. And he looked at me and he said, Mom, I got to tell you something. He said he had applied for a job with the Anne Arundel County Fire Department. He wanted to work what they call truck, which is search and rescue. It's where they go into burning buildings and rescue people. He said if he didn't get hired with them, he was going to go into the military. And I don't remember the name of the branch that he referred to it as, but they are the ones that, they're paramedics, and they fly into hostile territory and rescue wounded soldiers. And I told him, I said, Tyler, first of all, get that out of your head. I said, don't even think about doing something like that. I said, that's entirely too dangerous. And if anything ever happened to you, I could not go on. I couldn't survive. I said, nor would I want to. We were very close, very, very close. And I meant every word I said. I did not think I could ever survive losing him. Well, he gets up off the couch and he comes up to me and he puts his hand on my knee and kisses my forehead. And he said, Mom, I promise you're going to be all right. Well, what I didn't know at the time, that was the last time I was ever going to see him again. The next morning, I got up. It was a gorgeous spring day, record high, like 93 degrees, I think it was. And I went to work at my office in Columbia. Well, I was leaving about 4:45, and my phone rang, and it was my oldest son. And he wanted just to give me a heads up that a call had just gone out for a head-on collision on Kent Island. And he said, Mom, he said, I'm listening to it now, and it's really bad. So I told him, I said, well, let me call Tyler and see what's going on, and I'll give you a call back. And he said, okay, well, when you talk to him, tell him to call me, because ever since the call went out, I've been trying to call him, and he's not answering. Well, I said, well, he's probably on the call, which made sense. Well, I called Tyler, and he didn't answer. So I left him a voicemail, and I'll tell you, Tyler always returned my voicemails. Even when he was on a fire call, he would call me right back and just say, Mom, I'm gonna call you back. Just so I would at least not worry. I would know he was okay. And keep in mind, I was in Columbia going all the way back to Kent Island, at least an hour drive, more like an hour and a half. So I didn't want to worry all the way back, so I actually called my husband. I said, look, he was already on 10 Island. And I said, do me a favor, just drive by the firehouse, just make sure his car's there. Because if his car's there, then I would know that he was on the call. Well, a few minutes later, he called me back and he said, no, his car's not there. So of course, that's when I really began to panic a bit. And I said, okay, call his brother, his sister, have them call everyone, help me find him. I said, I just have a really bad feeling about this. They all told me I was overreacting. But they did. They all kept trying. They called his friends. They called both of the places that he worked at. They just weren't able to find him. Nobody knew where he was. So my husband decided to go ahead and go down Cox Neck Road where this crash had happened. And as I was just getting off the Bay Bridge, entering Queen Anne's County, my phone rang. And at first I was so relieved because I thought, oh, thank God, it's Tyler, calling me back. But it wasn't, obviously. It was my husband, and he was calling to tell me that Tyler was one of the boys involved in the crash. And all I could do was like scream at that moment and say, oh my God, is he dead? First words out of my mouth. And he said he didn't know. He had, there's all the calls, by the way, I made to Tyler on my drive back. Anyway, he said he had driven down the Cox Neck Road and there were all kinds of people lined up and down the road. And he had asked them if they knew who was involved in the crash, and they told him it was Tyler, Corey, Mike, and Harrison. So luckily that was only Cox Neck Road was the next exit up. So I get off and go down Cox Neck Road because obviously if my son's in a car crash, I'm not going to go home. I want to go to where he's at. I need to make sure he's okay. So when I pulled over, parked my car, there were so many people there. I cannot even begin to tell you how many cars there were, and helicopters flying, news choppers flying in the sky. But the road was blocked off way before the crash, so they weren't letting anybody near it. But I did see a group of first responders. I didn't recognize them, so I knew it wasn't the guys from 10 Island, where Tyler volunteered. But I ran up to them, and I asked them. I said, "I know my son was one of the occupants, or involved in the crash." I said, "I need one of you to tell me he's still alive." And they said, "Who's your son?" I said, "Tyler Elsey." And at that very second, every one of them, and there was probably 15 to 20 of them, every one of them either looked away or looked down. Not one of them would say a single word or look at me. Not one of them. And at that moment, I knew what they were telling me. And as you can see, these are actual, this is from a video that the news actually took. So this is real, not reenacted. I just went nuts. I started hitting that was actually a paramedic who was standing there. I was hitting everybody, hitting on them saying, "You're going to tell me my son's alive." He responds to car crashes and rescues other people. He's not in them. But of course she couldn't tell me that. After a few moments, I was approached by a deputy and a priest, and they tried to calm me down, and he confirmed I was Tyler's mom, and he said, "I need you to be strong. I need you to be strong. Tyler needs you to be strong." And that gave me a little bit of relief, because I thought, well, if he needs me to be strong, then he must just be hurt really bad. But then he went on to say, there was a very serious motor vehicle collision. And yes, Tyler was an occupant in one of those vehicles. And he said, and I'm very sorry to have to tell you, but he is deceased. And instantly, I collapsed straight to the ground in the middle of the road. I can't even begin to tell you what it felt like There are no words to explain it. The closest I can come is to say it literally felt like my soul had just been ripped out of my body. I was trembling so bad I could not stand. I couldn't think. And all I could do was keep saying over and over, no, you're wrong, not Tyler. Tyler, all he wanted to do was save lives. You're wrong. I can just remember saying that over and over. So finally I said, look, I want to see him. I want to see my son. They looked at the deputy and the priest looked at each other. And then the priest looked at me and said, ma'am, Tyler would not want that. He said he wouldn't want your last memory of him to be a memory of the condition he's in right now. That was devastating to hear. And I really don't have much memory of what happened immediately after that. I know that, well, the first thing I had to do, of course, was I had to call his brother and sister. Well, I called his sister, who, she was actually with all the boys the night before. They had hung out at her house and watched movies that night. She's very close to her brother. And she picked up the phone when she saw it was me, and all she said is he dead? That's all she could say. And me, I'm not thinking straight at all, because believe me, as a mother, once you're told that your child was just killed, you are not really fully aware of what you're doing. And I just blurted out, he's dead. He's dead. All four of them are dead. Harrison, Tyler, Mike, Corey, they're all dead. And I can just remember, I can still to this day hear her screaming. And the phone dropped, and she, just like I did, collapsed to the ground. Then after I hung up, my phone rang, and this one I was really dreading. It was Liz. The girl he had dated all through high school. And she said, Mom, what's going on? She says, everyone keeps blowing up my phone, and they're telling me that Tyler's dead, that he was killed in a car crash. And I had to tell her, honey, I'm sorry, but it's true. I said, I was here at the crash scene now, and they've confirmed it was Tyler. And that poor girl sobbed so hard. You couldn't understand a single word she was saying. She couldn't catch her breath. I'll never forget that. They had a vigil the next day, the next evening at the high school football field. Over 1,000 people came. People that didn't even know the families or the boys. But they're a very close-knit community, and they wanted to show support. And the fire department, needless to say, Tyler's fire department, Ken Island, they were the ones who got called to the crash. They had no clue that it was going to be one of their own inside the car. And in fact, it took them 30 minutes. You see how fast on the mock crash and that reenactment, you see how fast they're able to use the jaws of life and get victims out. Well, this car was so bad, it took them 30 minutes to find out that it was Tyler. And the reason why they didn't see him at first was because it was, as one person put it, a tangled mess of two kids in the back seat. Tyler was in the back, one of the ones in the back seat. And the way he was positioned, they could tell he had on his fire shirt because he wasn't even going to go. He was going to go directly, they were all at Harrison's house. He was going to go directly to his Fire 2 class. So he had on his Ken Island Fire Department shirt. So they knew it was one of their own. But again, the way he was positioned, that's all they saw was his back. So when they finally when they were finally able to get to him, and they saw that it was Tyler, the news reported that literally a lot of them just fell to their knees and sobbed. It hit them really hard. In fact, they had to send all of Ken Island back to the station and call in every other station within the county in Talbot County. Talbot County actually brought out this huge tent, and when they removed the boys from the car, they put all 4 of them in a tent that acted as a makeshift morgue until all of them could be positively identified. That was a hard sight to see. You know, and as I said, I don't remember much about Tyler's funeral or anything from that moment on, but there was one part of Tyler's funeral I'll never forget. I was sitting, we were at the cemetery, and I was sitting right next to his casket, and they announced his final call. They put out his final call over the radio, and you heard the fire sirens go off. And then my oldest son, who was, of course, in his formal fire department uniform, he slowly walked up to the casket, and he was just trembling, and his lips were quivering, and he had all these tears streaming down his face. And he saluted his baby brother and said a final goodbye. That was, as a mother, I can't even begin to tell you. I couldn't comfort him. I couldn't even comfort myself. That was the hardest part to watch. And as long as I live, I will never forget that. In the days following the funeral, I didn't think I was going to survive. I really didn't. And I'm always hesitant to say this part because I don't want you guys to think I really am loony, but for the first 10 days, up until just a couple of days before his funeral, I had convinced myself that all I had to do was pray really, really hard, nonstop, and then God would answer my prayers and make all of this just a nightmare that I'm going to wake up from, and it's not going to be real. I had convinced myself of that. But obviously that didn't happen, because it really did happen. It was very real. I got to the point where I didn't think I could go on, and I had actually considered taking my own life. Luckily for me, I had my mom, who had lost children of her own, and she said, she was very blunt with me and very stern, and said, "How dare you?" She said, "Think about that." She said, "All Tyler wanted to do for the rest of his life was save the lives of other people. And here you are talking about taking your own life." She said, "How selfish is that?" She said, "Instead, why don't you do something productive and live Tyler's legacy for him? Go out and save other people's lives for him." Well, I didn't know what she meant. I mean, surely she didn't think I was going to go out and fight fires, and which she didn't. She said, "Go talk to other kids. Make sure that this never happens to others so that other mothers don't go through what you're going through." And it made perfect sense. But the first thing I had to do was find out what happened. How could it be possible that they only drove half a mile, mind you. How can it be that they can go right down the street and 4 very strong, healthy boys be killed? Like, how? It made no sense. And of course, can you guess what everyone kept asking? Were they drinking? Were they on drugs? Well, I had no doubt that I knew Tyler would never get in a car with anyone under the influence. But I had to be able to say with 100% certainty. So my husband and I went to Baltimore to the chief medical examiner's office. And as hard as it was, I got a copy of his autopsy report. And the medical examiner, I thought they were just going to give me the autopsy and I'd be on my way. He actually wanted to sit down with us and go over the report because he knew I was going to have questions. Well, the first thing I noticed on his autopsy report, first of all, if you look at this picture, Tyler was really tall. He was like 6'2". But the autopsy report said he was 5'7". So I quickly pointed out, "You have a typo there." And as God is my witness, he got tears in his eyes. And he said, no, ma'am, it's not a typo. He said, after the crash, when we got him here and before we performed the autopsy, we always measure. And because of the number of bones in his body that were broken, in his body being crushed from the pelvis down, he was only 5'7". I think out of everything, that blew my mind more than anything. That list you see right there on the left, that's all the injuries that he suffered. There was not a part of his body, a bone or an internal organ that wasn't damaged or destroyed in that crash. And again, that just left me with more questions. How could that happen? How is that even possible? But luckily I get to the end of the report. The good thing, none of them were under the influence of drugs and alcohol. So I did at least get my answer to that. The next thing I had to do, I wanted to go see the car. I thought, I need to see this car that caused those damages to my son. So my husband and I both get to the salvage yard. It was taken all the way to Salisbury. And they brought out the car on one of these little lift, what do you call those things?
Forklift.
Yeah, it's some kind of forklift. They brought the car out on a forklift. Okay, just this little mini thing. That's what the car looked like when I saw it. I was speechless. And of course, I start rummaging through the inside of the car as best I could. I figured I was going to find something. Something was going to tell me what made these boys crash, what caused those kind of injuries. And I felt something down below what was left of one of the seats. And I kept trying to pull it out, and it took a while. I was tugging and tugging. Well, when I finally pulled it out, it was Tyler's new shoes that he had just bought and was so excited to have. I can't even tell you what, I can't tell you what that did to me. So the next thing was the accident investigation report, which is, I believe they mentioned outside, takes a long time to get, a long time. But when we finally got it and went through it, here's what we knew. We knew that all the boys had been at Harrison's house, who lived right there off that main road where they crashed. They had been there playing basketball. Like I said, it was a gorgeous day. And they hadn't seen each other in literally months because everyone was just so busy. So they spent the day together. And then Tyler was getting ready to go to Fire 2 class. And the other boys were getting in the car and we're gonna take a drive to cool off. Well, Harrison, of course, begged and begged and begged and begged and begged and pleaded with Tyler to go with them. He said, we'll only be gone 5 minutes. That's it. He said, then you can come, we'll come right back here and you can leave for your Fire 2 class. Corey, the driver, had just had his car customized, lowered, and other stuff. They wanted to go see how it drove. And that's when Tyler made the decision to go ahead and go with him. It's like, okay, it's only going to be 5 minutes, I'll go. So he climbed into the back seat with Harrison, another kid who was 6'2". They drove down to the end of the street. They turned around to head back. Like I said, only half a mile. But they did so on a, mind you, the speed limit was 48 miles per hour on this road. The last known speed that was registered, whoops, did I go too far? was 97 miles per hour. There was my answer. 57 miles per hour over the speed limit. And we don't know why. We have no clue why. My guess, best guess, is that they wanted to see how quickly they could get the car up to 100. But they never made that. Of course, we'll never know the real answer because none of them survived it. They lost control, Corey lost control of the car, and the car started to slide to this way, what is that, clockwise. And then he tried to correct, and when he tried to correct, he overcorrected, which shot him across the center line, right into the path of a car traveling in the opposite direction. That car was doing 40 miles per hour. At the speed of, or at the time of impact, the car had slowed down to 76 miles per hour. Now, I know that you just heard some data on crash force. You guys might know what that is, or impact force, it's sometimes called. What that is the calculation of how much force hits the body when you're in a car crash. And it's more complicated, but you know, to simplify it, it's the weight of the victim times the speed of the car. Of course, there are a couple other factors involved, but I can tell you this. It was equivalent, the force that hit Tyler was over 19 tons of force that hit his body. My only consolation was something the medical examiner told me. And he said, ma'am, he said, I'll be honest, he said, God took your son in the most humane way possible. He said he didn't see what was coming, he didn't feel anything, he said it was instant. And the reason he knew it was instant was because his brainstem on impact completely severed, and his descending aorta completely tore apart from his heart. Both of those are instant death. You don't stand a chance. And mind you, neither Harrison nor Tyler were wearing seatbelts, which is probably why Tyler ended up with 4 skull fractures. Yeah. They were always saying, I don't need a seatbelt, Mom. I'm in the back seat and we're only going right down the street. Well, you know what? They didn't wear a seatbelt that day because they were in the back seat and they only went half a mile down the street. And look what happened. So the point is that all it takes is one bad choice, one bad decision, in a matter of seconds or minutes. We know that the boys left Harrison's house at 4 o'clock, and we know this because his dad gets home every single day from work at 4 o'clock. As they were pulling out, Harrison's dad was pulling in. So we know it was 4 o'clock. And by 4:03, they were all gone. 3 minutes and one bad choice. I want to talk for just a little bit, real quick, about the impact of what the crash did. First of all, my oldest son, who you see there, he never fought another fire. He immediately just resigned his position, his volunteer position at the fire company. He never fought another fire. To this day, he suffers PTSD and severe depression. He blames himself. You'll hear this a lot when you hear about crashes. When there's siblings involved, they often suffer survivor's guilt, especially when they're older, is all of his war. And Christopher really still suffers with that 11 years later. My mom, who helped me, she's really the reason I'm still here. The grief was too much for her, and exactly 1 year later, she passed away. Grief takes a toll, a very physical toll on your body. Oh, and my daughter. Oh boy. With her, again, she was so close to Tyler. They just spent the night together watching movies. After the crash, she dealt with it. She just needed something. She needed the pain to go away. So she got hooked on prescription pain pills, which quickly turned to a heroin addiction. I mean, this was a young woman who had a job as a supervisor with a telecom company. She was married, she had kids, a car, a house. She had a good future. And by the time all of it was over, she lost it all, even her freedom, because the only way I was going to be able to save her life was to set her up to be arrested and put in jail for a year. And that's what happened. But that was the only way I could save her life, and I was not going to have to bury a second child. Luckily, by the grace of God, or I like to say maybe a little heavenly help from Tyler, she did kick the habit. She did recover, and she had two and a half years of being off drugs. Well, that happiness and relief didn't last long, because once you do drugs, for some reason, the public and even doctors tend to be biased. So on June 11th of 2022, she suffered a massive stroke. She had a blood clot blocking blood flow to her brain that was so large they couldn't even remove it. It was too dangerous to remove. But she stayed at the emergency room for 14 hours while I argued with the doctors that it wasn't a drug overdose. I knew there was no way. And even after the tox screen came back negative, they still said, no, it's a drug overdose. She's probably overdosing on something like cough syrup. So in a way that day, I did lose a second child. Maybe she's physically still here, but the daughter I knew is gone. She can barely speak. Speaking with her is like playing charades all day. She's in a wheelchair. She can't move her right side, can't use her right hand or arm at all. She can't read anymore. So yeah, I've basically lost another child that day. And again, if you keep tracing back to why, it all comes back to she lost her brother in that car crash and couldn't handle it. Her oldest son, my oldest grandchild, was probably the only grandchild I have who was old enough to remember the crash. And he was there when I called Amanda and told her. And he remembers her falling to the ground. He remembers every detail. Well, he's going to be 20 years old in July. To this day, he still doesn't have a driver's license. And every time we ask him, when are you going to go get your license? He tells us the same thing. I'm not ready. I need more practice. The bottom line is that day traumatized him. I don't know that he'll ever drive. I don't know that he'll ever feel like he would be able to do so without putting everyone's life in danger. He's scared to death. This particular year that just passed was really rough for me because almost all of Tyler's friends that he hung out with and grew up with got married or had babies. And that was hard because I had always thought about Tyler. I knew him and Liz would get married. I knew they would have kids. They already had their baby names picked out. And we used to talk all the time about the dance, the mother-son dance. And we would play songs, and I would pick out songs like what we were going to dance to at his wedding. But I never got that chance. But I will say, and this is bittersweet, but when one of his very close friends got married this past June, I think it was, he had his mother and son dance with his mom, and then surprised me and called me up to the dance floor. And he gave me that mother-son dance that I never got with Tyler. And that's something that I will hold in my heart forever. And hopefully as you hear these stories, you can think about your own parents or siblings or family or friends and think about how your choices could impact them. Because I'll tell you something, it doesn't go away. They say that it gets, it gets better with time. They lied. It doesn't. Maybe it gets different. You learn to live with it. It doesn't go away. You don't forget about it, ever. It will haunt you. It will haunt me and my kids till the day that I die. I know a lot of you here are seniors, and this is what I ask as we get ready to wrap up, is think about where you want to be 1 year from now. Most of you probably have a good idea. I'm assuming you're probably thinking you're going to be away in college, starting to learn something that's going to give you a great career. Well, I want to show you a picture of the boys that was taken on April 20th, 2012 at Joseph A. Banks. This was taken when the boys were shopping for their prom formals. Now fast forward exactly 1 year to the day, April 20th, 2013. That's where Tyler was. At his funeral, we were getting ready to bury him. 1 year to the day later. So this is what I'm asking you. It's just, for as long as you live, I hope you remember the story. Remember that all it takes is that one bad choice, speeding, not wearing your seatbelts, being distracted with a car full of teens, and look at the lives it affected. How many lives, could Tyler have saved had he not been killed? I guarantee you it would be a lot. Who knows, maybe one of you guys would have been saved. So that's my story. Before I close up though, I do want to play another video for you, just to show you the kind of the life and death of Tyler, to help you remember him. And thank you, by the way, for hearing my story.